Hello and welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
You are, and I am Matthew Lucas, and we post every week, so do hit subscribe if you want to follow our continuing adventures, and why wouldn't you, Mr.
Well,
Ryan?
I would think it would be inappropriate if people didn't, so there you go.
Here. Now, what are we going to do this week, Mr. Ryan?
All right, we're going to visit two different regions of the world to look at two completely different plants that actually have no real connection with each other.
Except they're both flowering now.
And that is the main connection. So we're going to go to Southern Africa.
Yes, loving that.
Yes, and then we're going to go to the islands of Sardinia and Corsica and the south of France.
Oh, well, without further ado, I'm loving the sound of that. Let's head off.
What a good idea.
Is this not then the first cab off our rank, Mr. Ryan?
It certainly is. This is a fabulous plant from South Africa called Mackaya Bella.
Mackaya Bella.
Yes.
Bella, you are. The flowers are stunning.
And your Latin is improving. So yes, Bella does stand for that. The Mackaya, it was named after James Mackay, who was a Scottish botanist who immigrated to Ireland. He started the Botanic Gardens at Trinity College.
Oh, yeah.
He also wrote the definitive at the time flora of Hibernica, so the Irish flora, and had this genus of what is now considered to be about 6 species named after him. And so he died in the 1860s. He was quite an influential man of his time, so he deserves a Bella named after him.
Well, indeed. Now, it is a beautiful shrub with, I'm just trying to compare these flowers. Doesn't the flower look a little bit like a jacaranda? Or is that a long bow?
It is possibly a long bow. Actually, if you look at the flower really closely, the family resemblance is actually quite clear. Its actual family is Acanthaceae, so it's in the same family as the acanthus. So,
really? Which happens to be
just over
right
there.
Here. Hang on, I'm going to just swing the camera around.
Oh,
this is very technical. Look at that.
Look, it's relative, just over there. So that's Acanthus mollis, the bear's breeches or oyster plant, and this is in the same family. But this is a shrubby representative of the family, and it's really quite odd because this one comes from the southern part of South Africa. The other 5 species within the genus seem to be restricted to China and through Thailand, Myanmar, and down into the Malaysian peninsula. So there's this very disjunct...
A Gondwana separation.
Well, possibly, although I'm not quite sure how it works. But anyhow, it's a small genus. This is the only one of its genus that I've ever seen in cultivation. I've never seen any of the others. And it's a shrub with great potential, and people should look at this more. It won't grow well in a climate where you get even lightish frosts. Mine gets a bit bitten some winters, but it comes away again. It is, though, in other respects, almost indestructible.
Yes.
It is drought tolerant. Mine has, as far as I can remember, never been watered, and it went through the millennial drought way back when, which lasted for about a decade, and only got what nature threw at it. It's comparatively shade tolerant. So it's quite a shade tolerant plant. It will flower more heavily in a bit more sunlight, but it then doesn't look quite as vigorous and healthy looking, so the shade gives the nice dark greenness to the foliage.
I was going to say, the leaves have a really beautiful rich greenness, almost with a hint of bronze. I don't know if I'm imagining that, but there's a gorgeousness about the leaves.
Oh yes, the foliage is really good. It's well worth growing for that. Flowers in high summer, and it flowers over a reasonably prolonged period. It's very prunable. My plant would be 3 meters or more tall and probably 4 or 5 meters across, so it's a humongously big plant. But they are very manageable, so you can prune them back quite hard. I'm probably getting to a point where I'll have to do that to mine in due course. And if you want more, it will sometimes layer, so you can dig up rooted layers quite easily. But it's also surprisingly easy to strike from cuttings. And as a commercial nurseryman, I probably shouldn't be telling people that, but nonetheless, quite easy to strike from pieces, and it's a great filler shrub in sort of difficult dry shade areas. So we should be using it a lot more. I've no idea why it's never become sort of, particularly in our area of Victoria, garden centre fodder. It should, because it's easy to propagate. It'll flower in a 20 centimetre pot quite easily, or even a 15 centimetre pot, and it's easy to propagate. So the nursery industry shouldn't have anything against Mackaya Bella, other than perhaps it's just not well enough known.
And it's drought tolerant, very important for our culture.
Exactly.
Now, do you ever get different colorways with the flowers, or is it always this sort of very, very washed out lilac?
As far as I can tell, there only seems to be one form of it. It doesn't seem to have a lot of natural diversity. I haven't been into the wild though, so, well, I've been into South Africa, but I haven't seen
And you have been into wild, but
Yeah,
perhaps
yeah.
just not specific to
Yeah,
this.
not specific to this particular plant, so I haven't seen it growing in the wild. I'm quite convinced that what we've got that we're growing in Australia is probably one clone that is being propagated again and again and again.
Yeah.
So if there is any diversity in the wild, it hasn't come into cultivation. So this is the only colour I've ever seen around, and it is almost white, but has these quite dark purple veins in it.
Yeah.
I call them variegated veins.
Because you're a romantic.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. So the overall effect from a distance is this really pretty soft lavendery colour, and it stands out really well in the shade for that very reason.
It's a beauty, and I presume then it's an understory plant in its native habitat.
Oh yes, it grows in open forests and things. As far as I know, virtually right round the Cape in South Africa. So there
How
you go.
wonderful. All right, well, on to the next.
Let's go.
Number 2, Mr. Ryan, what is this gorgeous thing?
All right, this is a biennial Delphinium.
Oh,
So it doesn't look like most people's concepts of this genus.
no. Can I ask you one quick question? Are the other Delphiniums that we are more familiar with, are they biennial?
No, they tend to be more perennial, but
Right.
not long-lived perennials. You
Yes.
need to replace them fairly regularly.
Yep.
So this particular one is Delphinium requienii.
Delphinium requienii.
I'm
Do you
not
have
sure
to
about,
roll?
I don't know about the rolling of the tongue, but anyhow.
And does requiem, say it again?
Requienii.
Requienii, does that, requiem, is it about memorial, dying, forgetful?
No, it was named after a man called Esprit
Not
Requien.
Mr. Requiem.
Yeah, Requien. He died in the mid-1860s.
Yes.
And he was a student of the botany of southern France and Corsica.
Could this be where it's from?
It is in fact exactly where it's from. So this does come from Corsica, Sardinia and the southern parts of the mainland of France.
Yes.
And he's also got another plant that I've got in my garden named after him, Mentha requienii, which is Corsican mint, a little tiny mat-forming mint that you can grow in between pavers and what have you, and has this wonderful, luscious, minty smell when you stand on it.
Oh, well, we might just drop a shot of that in because it sounds fabulous.
All right, the other plant that I have in my garden that's named after Requien is Mentha requienii, which is Corsican mint. And it's a tiny little plant with minute leaves that grows in moist soil, and it smells divine.
Delphinium, now does that name refer, I'm imagining it refers to the Delphic Oracle.
No.
Oh.
It refers to dolphins.
What?
Yes, apparently some of the species of delphiniums, and some of them aren't actually in the genus anymore, but that's just nitpicking.
You crazy taxonomist.
Yes, I can be a bit that way. Had flowers that reminded one of the shape of a dolphin. So there you go. So that's
Well,
where Delphinium
I
comes
think you'd
from.
have to hit the drink to see a dolphin in any of these.
Well,
Just
I don't
saying.
think this one looks particularly dolphinesque,
No.
I have to say.
So this is a biennial.
Yep.
Is it, given that it's a Mediterranean plant, is it potentially weedy here in a vaguely Mediterranean climate?
I haven't thus far found it so.
No.
I mean, it's a self-seeder in my garden,
Yeah.
but always in moderation. I only ever get odd ones that come up
I know,
where I
I
might have
can't-
turned the soil a little bit
I
or
can't
something.
see very many. but-
No, and they're dotted though. I do have them in other parts of the garden. They seem to need a bit of disturbed soil to actually germinate in.
Pioneer plants, Stephen
Pioneer
Ryan.
plants, yes.
I learnt that from someone.
Yes, well, I wonder where that came from. And I actually got this originally. A friend of mine had been in a local large old garden and she'd seen this thing growing there and she bought me a specimen of it. I didn't immediately recognise it as a delphinium, but I knew it was in the right general family.
Yes.
And so I did some research, as one does, and eventually pinned it down to Delphinium requienii. Now, it hadn't been seen in this old garden for 30 or 50 years, and they cleaned out a garden bed, turned over the soil, and up came Delphinium requienii.
So the seed was viable after decades.
After
Goodness
decades.
me.
So I find that when I turn beds over here, if I don't mulch too heavily, then I often find the odd Delphinium requienii will come up. So I don't regularly raise it from seed. I just let it do its own self-seeding. And if it comes up where I don't want it, I pull it out. If it comes up somewhere appropriate, I leave it and enjoy it. So, but I only get a handful of self-sown seedlings every year. Having said that, there may be people in slightly different climates or different areas where it has become somewhat weedy, but I would be surprised if it became a problem.
There we go. Now, given its heritage, you sometimes get frost. It's a biennial, so it's got to survive the first year to be able to flower. So what do you reckon about its hardiness?
I don't think it will grow well in really cold climates. I know it's been used as a bedding plant in parts of France and parts of England and what have you.
Yeah.
So it should be hardy enough, but you could always raise it if you really like it. You could always put the extra miles in and raise it from seed in pots, bring it through its first winter, then plant it out into the garden after that point. So therefore it will then take off and flower. So you could do that like you can do with foxgloves and
hollyhocks.
And hollyhocks.
Which I've done with hollyhocks.
Yeah, lots of things you can carry them through that first winter as potted plants and then put them out into the garden.
Great idea. Well, this has been wonderful. Thank you, Delphinium that doesn't look like a dolphin.
There we go.
Well, they were fabulous, Mr. Ryan. Well done. And we didn't mention just how tall that Delphinium is. It's massive.
That's about as tall as I've ever grown it. So it's on a sort of the 2 metre-ish height, which is quite substantial.
A good year. 2022 is good for the Corsican Delphinium.
It is, because it's been coolish and damp, which sounds odd, but in the wild they probably never get to those sort of dimensions.
There you go. And of course your soil will be fabulous.
Well, of course. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
What can we possibly do to top this, Mr. Ryan?
I have no idea what we'll top this with.
Best you start thinking.
Yes, I will. I'll come up with a great subject for next week, I promise.
There we go. But until then, hit subscribe to find out exactly what we're doing, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Goodbye all.